The church doors slammed open, and 200 people turned to stare. Hazel Mercer stood in the doorway wearing a wedding dress that didn't fit, clutching a bouquet meant for someone else's hands. Her sister had vanished 6 hours ago with a gambler's promise and a stolen horse. Now the most powerful family in Red Hollow was demanding blood, land, or a bride. Any bride. Hazel's father shoved her forward into the aisle, and she stumbled. Laughter rippled through the pews. But then Rhett Kane stood from his seat at the altar, looked straight at her with eyes cold as January creek water, and said 5 words that would wreck both their lives. "I'll marry her instead." If you want to see how a woman nobody wanted becomes the most dangerous force on the frontier, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all started. The morning Vivian disappeared, Hazel was scrubbing blood out of a chicken slaughtering apron behind the Mercer ranch house. Her hands were raw and red, knuckles cracked from lye soap, and she was thinking about how much she hated Tuesdays when her father found her. Thomas Mercer didn't knock, didn't call her name. He just grabbed her by the arm hard enough to leave bruises and dragged her across the yard toward the house. "She's gone," he said. Hazel dropped the apron. "Who's gone?" "Your sister. That worthless, vain little bitch ran off with some card sharp from Tulsa. Took my best mare and the dowry money I had stored in the study." The world tilted sideways. Hazel caught herself against the porch railing. "When?" "Sometime after midnight. I found this on her pillow." He shoved a piece of paper into Hazel's face. The handwriting was Vivian's, all loops and flourishes like she was signing autographs. "Father, by the time you read this, I'll be married to a man who actually loves me. I won't spend my life chained to some frontier brute just because you need his water rights. Tell Rhett Kane I'm sorry. Tell Hazel she can have the dress." Hazel read it twice. Her stomach dropped into her boots. "The wedding's in 4 hours," Thomas said. "I know. The entire territory is coming. Every rancher, every banker, every landowner from here to the Kansas line. The Kanes spent $3,000 on this ceremony. They built a new wing on their house for her. Barrett Kane signed over mineral rights as part of the marriage contract." "I know, Papa." Thomas Mercer's face was the color of raw liver. "If we don't deliver a bride, Kane will bury us. He'll call in every debt we owe, block our water access, turn every supplier against us. We'll lose the ranch inside a month." Hazel's throat closed up. She knew what was coming before he said it. "You're going in her place." "No." It wasn't a question. "Papa, they don't want me. They want Vivian. She's the beautiful one. She's the one Rhett chose. Rhett Kane didn't choose anybody. This was a business arrangement, and your sister just torched it. Now you're going to fix it." "I can't just—" Thomas hit her. Not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough that her ears rang and her vision blurred. She tasted blood. "You will put on that dress," he said, voice flat and terrible. "You will get in the wagon. You will go to that church, and you will do whatever it takes to salvage this arrangement. Because if you don't, I will personally throw you off this property with nothing but the clothes on your back. Do you understand me?" Hazel touched her lip. Her fingers came away red. "Yes, sir." Okay. The dress didn't fit. Vivian was 5'6" and slender as a willow branch. Hazel was 5'3" and built like a woman who'd spent her whole life hauling water and chopping wood. The bodice was too loose in the chest, too tight in the shoulders. The hem dragged on the floor. The veil kept slipping sideways because Vivian's head was smaller. Their housekeeper, Mrs. Grady, did what she could with pins and needle thread, but there wasn't time for alterations. Every stitch was temporary. Every seam was a prayer. "You look lovely," Mrs. Grady lied. Hazel stared at herself in the mirror. Her face was too round, her arms too thick, her hair too dull. Next to Vivian, she'd always looked like the sketch an artist throws away before starting the real painting. "He's going to take one look at me and call it off," Hazel said. "Maybe. But maybe he'll surprise you. Men like Rhett Kane don't marry women like me." Mrs. Grady pinned the veil in place one more time. "Men like Rhett Kane marry whoever keeps their land safe. That's all this is, child. Business." Hazel closed her eyes. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No, it's supposed to make you feel realistic." That's it. The church was 10 miles outside Red Hollow, a whitewashed building that sat on a hill overlooking the valley where 3 rivers met. It was the only church for 60 miles in any direction, which meant every wedding, every funeral, every baptism happened here. The pews could hold 200 people if you packed them in tight. Today, all 200 seats were full. Hazel sat in the wagon beside her father, stomach twisting into knots. She could see the crowd through the windows, ranchers in their Sunday suits, women in feathered hats, children squirming in the heat. Everyone had come to see the most important wedding of the decade, the union of the Mercer water rights and the Kane grazing lands, the marriage that would create the largest ranch empire in the territory, the alliance that would shift the balance of power in Red Hollow for the next 50 years. And Hazel was about to ruin all of it by not being Vivian. "Remember what I told you," Thomas said as the wagon stopped. "You smile. You don't talk unless someone asks you a question. You do not mention your sister. If anyone asks where she is, you say she's ill. Let me handle Barrett Kane. What if Rhett won't go through with it? Then we're all finished." He climbed down from the wagon and walked toward the church without helping her. Hazel gathered the ridiculous skirt in both hands and half fell onto the dirt road. Her shoes were too big. Vivian's shoes. Everything about this was wrong. The church doors were open. She could hear the low hum of conversation inside, the scrape of boots on wood, the crying of a baby somewhere in the back rows. Hazel took one step toward the entrance. Then someone screamed. Not a scream of fear, a scream of rage. It came from inside the church, loud enough to rattle the windows. Hazel froze as a man's voice bellowed, "Where the hell is she?" That was Barrett Kane. She recognized his voice from the land meetings he'd had with her father. He sounded like a man who ate nails for breakfast. Thomas muttered a curse and strode into the church. Hazel followed, heart hammering. The scene inside was chaos. Barrett Kane stood at the front of the church, 6'4" and built like a grizzly bear, his face purple with fury. He was shouting at the preacher, at the crowd, at anyone within earshot. Beside him stood Rhett Kane, his son, still and silent as a grave marker. Rhett was 30 years old, tall and lean, with the kind of face that didn't smile much. He wore a black suit that looked like it was strangling him. His hands were rough and scarred from years of ranch work. His eyes were the pale gray of a sky before a storm. He hadn't looked toward the door yet. He was staring at the floor like he wanted it to open up and swallow him whole. "This is an insult," Barrett roared. "We signed a contract. We paid for this ceremony. Where's the bride?" Thomas stepped into the aisle. "She's here." Every head turned. Hazel stood in the doorway, clutching her oversized skirt, veil slipping sideways again, and the entire church went silent. Then someone laughed. It started in the back rows, a man's rough chuckle, and spread like fire through dry grass. Within seconds, half the church was snickering or whispering behind their hands. "That's not Vivian," someone said. "That's the fat sister." Did they seriously bring the wrong girl? Barrett Kane's face went from purple to bone white. "What the hell is this?" Thomas walked up the aisle, dragging Hazel behind him. She wanted to die. She wanted to sink into the floorboards and disappear forever. 200 people were staring at her, and every single one of them was thinking the same thing. What a joke. "There's been a complication," Thomas said, voice strained. "Vivian has taken ill, very suddenly. She's unable to fulfill her obligations today." "Ill?" Barrett's voice could have stripped paint. "She was fine yesterday. It came on fast." "Where is she?" "At the ranch, bedridden. The doctor says it might be pneumonia." Hazel's face burned. Everyone in this church knew it was a lie. Everyone. Barrett turned to the crowd. "Is there a doctor here who can confirm this?" A man in the third row stood up. "I'm Doc Brennan. I haven't seen Vivian Mercer in 3 weeks." The whispers got louder. Barrett turned back to Thomas. "You're lying. I'm trying to salvage an agreement that benefits both our families." "By bringing me the wrong daughter." "Hazel is perfectly capable of—" "Hazel?" Barrett looked at her like she was a broken plow. "This is the girl who can't even get a dance partner at the Harvest Social?" More laughter. Hazel's vision blurred. Rhett finally moved. He took one step forward, and his voice cut through the noise like a blade. "That's enough." The laughter stopped. Rhett looked at Hazel for the first time. His expression didn't change. No disgust, no pity, nothing. He studied her the way you'd study a horse at auction, checking for problems. Then he turned to his father. "It's fine." Barrett stared at him. "What?" It's fine. I'll marry her. The church erupted. Are you out of your mind? Barrett hissed. No, I'm done. Rhett's voice was calm, but there was something deadly underneath it. You've controlled every decision I've made for 30 years. Who I work with, who I do business with, who I'm supposed to marry. I'm finished. You want this alliance? Fine. But I'm marrying whoever the hell I want, and right now, that's her. He pointed at Hazel. She forgot how to breathe. Barrett grabbed Rhett's arm. You will not humiliate this family. You humiliated me the second you arranged this marriage without asking what I wanted. Now let go of my arm or I'll break yours. Father and son stared at each other. The air between them could have caught fire. Finally, Barrett let go. You'll regret this. Probably. Rhett walked down the aisle toward Hazel. The crowd parted. He stopped 3 feet away and looked at her with those empty gray eyes. Can you ride a horse? Hazel blinked. What? Can you ride a horse? Yes or no? Yes. Can you cook? Yes. Can you shoot a rifle? Yes. Then you'll do. He turned to the preacher. Let's get this over with. Ipat. The ceremony lasted 9 minutes. Hazel stood at the altar in a dress that didn't fit, next to a man who didn't want her, in front of 200 people who couldn't stop whispering. The preacher raced through the vows like he was being chased. Rhett's voice was flat when he said, I do. Hazel's voice shook when she said the same. When the preacher said, You may kiss the bride, Rhett leaned in and brushed his lips against her cheek. It lasted half a second. Then he stepped back and said, Let's go. He didn't wait for her. He walked straight out of the church into the blinding afternoon sun. Hazel gathered her skirt and stumbled after him, shoes flopping, veil falling off completely now. Outside, a horse and wagon waited. Rhett climbed into the driver's seat and picked up the reins. Get in. Hazel climbed up beside him. Her father was shouting something from the church steps, but Rhett didn't wait. He snapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward. They rode in silence. The road stretched out ahead of them, dusty and endless. The sun beat down. Hazel's dress stuck to her back with sweat. She kept waiting for Rhett to say something, anything, but he just stared straight ahead like she wasn't there. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. I'm sorry. He didn't look at her. For what? For ruining your wedding. You didn't ruin it. Your sister did. I'm still sorry you got stuck with me instead of her. Now he looked at her, just a glance, quick and unreadable. You think I wanted to marry Vivian? Didn't you? I never met her before last month. My father picked her out of a catalog of eligible daughters like she was a piece of furniture. I don't give a damn who I married as long as it got him off my back. Hazel's chest tightened. That's a terrible reason to get married. Yeah, welcome to frontier business. They hit a rut in the road. Hazel grabbed the seat to keep from falling. Rhett didn't even flinch. Where are we going? She asked. My ranch. It's about 15 miles north. What's it like? Isolated. That's all you're going to tell me? That's all you need to know. Hazel bit her lip. Blood from where her father hit her earlier seeped into her mouth again. She wiped it away. Rhett saw. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. The ranch appeared just before sunset. It sat in a shallow valley between 2 ridges, a sprawling compound of wooden buildings clustered around a main house, corrals, barns, a bunkhouse, a smokehouse. Everything was functional, built for work, not beauty. There were no flowers, no decorations, just raw wood and hard-packed dirt. Rhett stopped the wagon in front of the main house. We're here! Hazel climbed down. Her legs were stiff from the ride. She looked around at the empty yard, the silent buildings, the sky turning purple overhead. Where is everyone? Hands are out on the range. Won't be back until tomorrow. So it's just us? Yeah. He grabbed her bag from the back of the wagon and walked toward the house. Hazel followed. Inside the house was bigger than she expected. A large front room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen, a dining table, stairs leading up to a second floor. Everything was clean but worn, like it had been used hard for years. Rhett dropped her bag by the stairs. Your room's upstairs, second door on the right. What about you? I'll sleep down here. Hazel's stomach sank. We're not... No. His voice was flat. We're not. He walked past her into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He drank it in one swallow, then poured another. Hazel stood in the middle of the front room, still wearing the stupid dress, feeling like an idiot. Can I ask you something? She said, if you have to. Why did you really marry me? Rhett set the glass down. He stared at it for a long moment. Because I'm tired, he said finally. I'm tired of my father telling me what to do. I'm tired of playing his games, and I figured if I was going to be stuck in a marriage I didn't want, I might as well pick someone who didn't ask for this either. That's it? That's it. Hazel felt something crack in her chest. I'm not Vivian. I know. I'm not beautiful. I'm not charming. I'm not the kind of woman men fight over. I know. So what the hell am I supposed to do here? Rhett looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time since the church. His eyes were still cold, still distant, but something shifted in them, something almost human. Survive, he said, same as the rest of us. He walked out of the kitchen and headed for the stairs. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you start learning how this place works. He disappeared upstairs. A door closed. Hazel stood alone in the empty house, wearing a dead woman's dress, married to a man who didn't want her, and for the first time since this nightmare started, she let herself cry. Not because she was sad, because she was so goddamn angry she didn't know what else to do. The bedroom was worse than she imagined. It was beautiful. That was the problem. Someone had decorated it for a bride. There were lace curtains on the windows, a quilt on the bed with embroidered roses, candles on the dresser, a vase of dried wildflowers, everything soft and romantic and wrong. Hazel stood in the doorway and wanted to scream. This room was meant for Vivian. Every detail had been chosen for her. The colors, the fabrics, the little touches that said someone cared. And now Hazel was supposed to sleep here, surrounded by reminders that she was second choice. The backup plan, the consolation prize. She tore off the dress, threw it on the floor, kicked off the two big shoes. She found a nightgown in the dresser, also meant for Vivian probably, and pulled it on. It was too long. She stepped on the hem and almost fell. She wanted to break something, wanted to scream until her throat bled, wanted to burn this whole room to the ground. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Somewhere downstairs she heard Rhett moving around, the clink of glass, the scrape of a chair, then silence. Hazel lay down and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, someone knocked on her door before dawn. Hazel jerked awake, disoriented. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then she remembered. The wedding, the church. Rhett's cold eyes. Everything. Get up, Rhett's voice came through the door. Breakfast in 10 minutes. She dragged herself out of bed and got dressed. There were clothes in the dresser, also Vivian's, of course, but they fit even worse than the wedding dress. The skirt was too long. The blouse gaped at the shoulders. Hazel rolled up the sleeves and tried not to look at herself in the mirror. Downstairs, Rhett was already at the table with coffee and biscuits. He didn't look at her when she sat down. Sleep okay? He asked. No. Yeah, me neither. They ate in silence. The biscuits were hard as rocks. The coffee was strong enough to strip rust. Hazel forced it down anyway. I need you to understand something, Rhett said finally. This ranch doesn't run on fairy tales. We work dawn to dark, every day. No breaks, no holidays. If you can't handle that, tell me now. I can handle it. Good, because I don't have time to babysit you. I don't need babysitting. He looked at her. We'll see. After breakfast, he took her outside and showed her the layout. The corrals where they kept the horses. The barn where they stored feed and equipment. The smokehouse. The bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept. Everything was bigger than the Mercer Ranch, more organized, more efficient. But there was something wrong. Hazel couldn't put her finger on it at first. Then she started noticing the details. Broken fence rails that hadn't been fixed. Weeds growing in the corrals. Equipment scattered instead of stored properly. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. How many hands do you have? She asked. 12. Used to be 20. What happened? Half of them quit last year, said they weren't getting paid enough. Were they? Rhett's jaw tightened. That's not your concern. But Hazel's mind was already working. She'd spent years managing the finances for the Mercer Ranch because her father couldn't be bothered. She knew how to read account books, knew how to spot problems. And this ranch had problems. Big ones. A shit. That afternoon, while Rhett was out checking fence lines, Hazel found the office. It was a small room off the main house, filled with papers, ledgers, and dust. She opened the first ledger and started reading. 3 hours later, she wanted to throw up. The ranch was hemorrhaging money. Suppliers were overcharging for feed and equipment. Several hands were getting paid for days they didn't work. There were mysterious expenses with no receipts, and the profit margins were so thin that one bad season would wipe them out completely. Hazel spread the ledgers across the desk and started making notes. She was so focused she didn't hear Rhett come in until he spoke. "What are you doing?" She jumped. He stood in the doorway, covered in dust and sweat, staring at her like she'd just set his house on fire. "I'm looking at your books," she said. "Why?" "Because they're a mess." His expression went dark. "Those are private." "They're also wrong. Look at this." She pointed to a column of numbers. "You paid Travis Feed Company $800 for hay last month. That's double the market rate. Travis is the only supplier in the territory." "No, he's not. Wilson Feed in Blackstone will deliver for half that price. And look here, you're paying 3 hands for full weeks when the work logs show they only worked 4 days. Rhett walked over and looked at the ledger. His face didn't change, but his hands curled into fists. "Who told you to go through my accounts?" "Nobody. But someone needs to because you're getting robbed blind. This isn't your business. I'm your wife. This ranch is my business now, whether you like it or not." They stared at each other. The air felt like it might explode. Then Rhett said, "If you're wrong about this." "I'm not wrong. I've been managing ranch accounts since I was 15. My father's a drunk who can't add 2 numbers together without losing money. I kept his ranch afloat for 10 years. I know what I'm doing." Rhett looked at the ledgers again, then at her. Something shifted in his face. "Show me," he said. They spent the next 4 hours going through every account book in the office. Hazel pointed out discrepancies. Rhett cross-checked with work logs and receipts. By the time the sun set, they'd found over $3,000 in fraudulent charges and missing payments. Rhett sat back in his chair and rubbed his face. "Jesus Christ." "It's not your fault," Hazel said. "You've been doing the work of 20 men. You didn't have time to check the numbers." "I should have caught this." "Now you have." He looked at her. Really looked at her, and this time his eyes weren't cold. They were tired and angry, and something else she couldn't name. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "Because I don't have anywhere else to go." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Rhett stood up. "I need to talk to some people. Stay here." He walked out. Hazel sat alone in the office, surrounded by ledgers and dust and the fading light, and realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, she'd done something that mattered, and it felt good. Guam. That night, Rhett came back late. Hazel was still awake, sitting in the front room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. He looked exhausted. "I fired 3 people." "Who?" "The supply manager. 2 of the hands who were stealing work hours. Told Travis Feed Company we're switching suppliers. He threatened to blacklist us. I told him to try." Hazel's chest tightened. "Are you going to be okay?" "I don't know." He poured himself a drink. "But at least now I know where the money's going." He sat down across from her. They didn't speak for a while, just sat there in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Finally, Rhett said, "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone useless." Hazel laughed. It came out bitter. "That's what everyone expects." "Why?" "Because that's what I've always been. The ugly sister, the fat one, the one nobody wants." Rhett's expression didn't change. "You saved this ranch $3,000 today. That's not useless. That's just numbers. Numbers keep people alive out here." He finished his drink and stood up. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hell." He walked toward the stairs, then stopped. "Thank you," he said, without turning around. Then he was gone. Hazel sat in the dark for a long time after that, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, stupid hope. The hope lasted 3 days. On the fourth morning, Hazel woke to shouting outside. She threw on clothes and ran downstairs to find Rhett standing in the yard with 6 of his remaining ranch hands. They looked angry. "You can't just cut our pay," one of them said. His name was Dutch, a barrel-chested man with a scar across his eyebrow. "We got families." "I'm not cutting your pay," Rhett said. "I'm cutting the pay of people who weren't working their full hours." "That's the same damn thing." "No, it's not. You want full wages? Work full days." Another hand stepped forward. "This is because of her, isn't it?" He pointed at Hazel. "That fat girl you married instead of the pretty one. She's filling your head with—" Rhett moved so fast Hazel barely saw it. He grabbed the man by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the fence. "Say that again." The man's face went white. "I didn't mean—" "Say it again and I'll break your jaw." "Rhett?" Hazel's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Let him go." Rhett didn't move. His knuckles were white where he gripped the man's shirt. "Please," Hazel said. He let go. The man stumbled back, gasping. The other hands watched with hard eyes. "Anyone else have complaints?" Rhett asked. Silence. "Then get back to work." They scattered. Dutch was the last to leave, shooting Hazel a look that made her skin crawl. When they were alone, Rhett turned to her. "You shouldn't have interfered." "You were going to hit him." "Yeah, I was. That won't fix anything. It would have made me feel better." He walked past her toward the barn. "Stay in the house today. Some of the hands aren't happy about the changes." "I'm not hiding." "I'm not asking you to hide. I'm telling you to be smart." He stopped and looked back at her. "They're angry at me, but they'll take it out on you if they get the chance. That's how this works." He left before she could argue. Hazel stood in the yard, feeling the weight of a dozen invisible eyes on her back. She turned toward the bunkhouse and saw curtains move in one of the windows. Someone was watching. She went back inside and locked the door. For the next week, things got worse. 2 more hands quit without notice. Equipment started breaking in suspicious ways. Someone left a dead rat on the porch. Rhett worked 18-hour days trying to hold everything together, and Hazel spent her time going through the financial records, finding more problems. The ranch had been bleeding money for years, not just from theft, but from bad decisions. Rhett's father had set up contracts that locked them into unfavorable rates. They were paying too much for everything and getting too little in return. The water rights that were supposed to be their biggest asset were tangled up in legal disputes with neighboring ranches. Barrett Kane had built an empire on paper, but the foundation was rotting. Hazel made lists, wrote letters to new suppliers, researched market rates. She worked in the office until her eyes burned and her hand cramped from writing. Every night she showed Rhett what she'd found, and every night his face got a little more tired. "We need to renegotiate the water contract with the Dawson Ranch," she said one evening. They were sitting at the kitchen table with account books spread between them. "They're paying us half what they should for access to the North Creek. Dawson won't renegotiate. He's got a signed agreement." "The agreement was signed 8 years ago. Water rights are worth triple that now." "So we sue him?" "We threaten to. Most people don't want to go to court. They'll settle." Rhett rubbed his temples. "And if they don't?" "Then we cut off their access and find someone else who needs it." "That's a good way to make enemies." "You already have enemies. Might as well make money while you're at it." He looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You're mean when it comes to business." "I'm practical." "Same thing out here." They worked until midnight. When Hazel finally went upstairs, her back ached and her head pounded, but she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the numbers, the contracts, the 100 different ways this ranch could fail. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, and now she was trapped in a place where every decision she made affected real people's lives. It was terrifying, but it was also the most alive she'd ever felt. The next morning, she found Rhett in the barn fixing a broken stall door. He was shirtless, covered in sweat and sawdust, and for a second Hazel forgot what she was going to say. She'd seen men without shirts before, but Rhett was all lean muscle and old scars, the kind of body built by years of brutal work. He looked up. "What?" She blinked. "I need to go into town." "Why?" "To talk to the bank about refinancing the equipment loans, and I need to meet with Wilson Feed about switching suppliers." "I'll go with you." "You don't have to." "Yeah, I do. You think they'll take you seriously without me there?" He had a point. Hazel had spent enough time around businessmen to know they didn't listen to women unless a man told them to. They rode into Red Hollow that afternoon. The town was bigger than Hazel expected, with a main street lined with shops, a bank, a hotel, and 3 saloons. People stopped to stare as they rode past. Word had spread about the wedding disaster. Everyone knew Rhett Kane married the wrong sister. They tied up the horses outside the bank. A man in a suit watched them from the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Kane," he said, "what can I do for you?" "We're here about the equipment loan," Rhett said. "Of course. Come in." Inside, the bank smelled like old paper and furniture polish. They sat across from the manager, a thin man named Horace Pell, who kept glancing at Hazel like she was a stain on his desk. Rhett started to explain why they were there, but Hazel interrupted. "We need better terms on the loan. The current interest rate is predatory, and you know it." Pell's eyebrows went up. "Mrs. Kane, the rate is 8%, market rate is 5%. You're making an extra $300 a year off us for no reason other than greed." "I assure you, our rates are competitive." "They're not. I've checked with 3 other banks in the territory. They all offered better terms. So either you match 5% or we refinance elsewhere." Pell looked at Rhett. "Is she serious?" "Yes," Rhett said. "She is." There was a long silence. Pell folded his hands on the desk. "I'll need to speak with the board." "You have 3 days," Hazel said. "After that, we take our business to Blackstone." They walked out. Rhett didn't say anything until they were back on the street. "You didn't tell me you were going to threaten him." "Would you have let me?" "Probably not." "That's why I didn't tell you." He almost smiled. "You're going to get us in trouble." "We're already in trouble. I'm just making sure we get paid for it." Their next stop was Wilson Feed, a warehouse on the edge of town. The owner, a grizzled man named Jack Wilson, was more reasonable. He agreed to undercut Travis Feed's prices by 30% and promised weekly deliveries. They shook hands, and Hazel felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. On the way back to the ranch, Rhett said, "You're good at this." "At what?" "Scaring people into doing what you want." "I'm not scaring them. I'm just pointing out reality." "Same thing." They rode in silence for a while. The sun was setting, turning the sky orange and pink. Hazel watched the shadows stretch across the valley and felt something shift inside her. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was making decisions, changing things, forcing people to pay attention. It should have felt good, but all she could think about was how much she was still the second choice, the backup plan. The woman Rhett married because he had no other option. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "If you have to." "Do you regret marrying me?" Rhett was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "I regret getting married at all, but if I had to do it, you're probably the least terrible option." "That's romantic." "I'm not a romantic." "I noticed." He glanced at her. "Do you regret it?" "Every day." "Fair enough." They didn't talk the rest of the way home, but when they got back to the ranch and Rhett helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingered on her arm for just a second longer than necessary. It probably didn't mean anything, but Hazel held on to it anyway, because it was all she had. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Somewhere downstairs, Rhett was probably doing the same thing. 2 people trapped in a marriage neither of them wanted, trying to survive. It wasn't a love story, but maybe it could be something else, something harder and more real. Or maybe she was just fooling herself. The problems kept coming. A week later, 3 steers went missing from the north pasture. The fence had been cut deliberately, and the tracks led toward the Dawson Ranch. Rhett rode over there with 2 of his hands and came back with a black eye and no answers. Frank Dawson swore he didn't know anything about stolen cattle, and Rhett couldn't prove otherwise. "He's lying," Rhett said that night. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a raw steak pressed to his face. "His men took those steers." "I know it." "Then report it to the sheriff," Hazel said. "The sheriff won't do anything. Dawson donates to his campaign every year." "So we're just supposed to let him steal from us?" "Unless you've got a better idea." Hazel thought for a minute. "What if we cut off his water access?" Rhett lowered the steak. "What?" He needs the North Creek for his cattle. That's part of the contract. But the contract says he can't use the water if he's in violation of any territorial livestock laws. Stealing cattle is a violation. We can't prove he stole them. We don't have to. We just have to accuse him. Then he either admits it or fights us in court. Either way, we shut off his water until it's settled. Rhett stared at her. That's vicious. That's business. He'll come after us. He's already coming after us. At least this way we hit back. Rhett set down the steak. His eye was swelling shut, purple and angry. If we do this, it's going to get ugly. Uglier than stealing our cattle? Yeah, a lot uglier. Hazel met his gaze. I'm not scared of ugly. He studied her for a long moment, like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he nodded. All right, we'll do it your way. The next morning, Rhett rode out to the North Creek with 3 hands and a set of chains. They locked the water gate and posted a sign that said the Dawson Ranch was in violation of their access agreement. By noon, Frank Dawson showed up at the Kane Ranch with 10 men and a lawyer. Hazel watched from the porch as Dawson climbed off his horse. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and red-faced, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "Kane!" he bellowed. "Open that damn gate!" Rhett walked out of the barn. "Can't do that." "The hell you can't. We have a contract. The contract has conditions. You violated them." "You can't prove that." "Then take me to court." Dawson's face turned redder. "You're making a big mistake." "Probably, but it's my mistake to make." Dawson's eyes shifted to Hazel. "This is her idea, isn't it? That fat little wife of yours. I heard she's been messing with your accounts, turning you against your own people." Rhett's voice dropped. "Get off my property." "Or what?" "Or I'll shoot you." The air went dead still. Dawson's men put their hands on their guns. Rhett didn't move. Behind him, his hands appeared from the barn and the bunkhouse, all of them armed. Dawson looked around, calculating odds. Then he spat in the dirt. "This isn't over." "I know." Dawson and his men rode off. When they were gone, Rhett let out a breath and turned to Hazel. "Well," he said, "we just made an enemy for life." "Good," Hazel said. "He was a thief anyway." That night, Rhett didn't go downstairs to sleep. He sat in the front room with a rifle across his lap, watching the windows. Hazel came down around midnight and found him there. "You should rest," she said. "Can't. Not until I know Dawson's not coming back tonight." She sat down across from him. "You think he will?" "Maybe. Depends on how angry he is." "Angry enough to start a war over water rights?" "Men have started wars over less." They sat in silence. Outside, the wind howled. Hazel pulled a blanket around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For making things harder." Rhett looked at her. "You didn't make things harder. You made them clearer. There's a difference." "Doesn't feel like it." "Yeah, I know." He went back to watching the windows. Hazel stayed where she was, too wired to sleep. After a while, Rhett said, "Tell me something." "Like what?" "Something true. Something you've never told anyone." Hazel hesitated. "Why?" "Because we've been married for 3 weeks, and I don't know anything about you except that you're good with numbers and you don't back down from fights." She thought about lying, about giving him some safe, meaningless answer, but she was tired of being invisible, tired of hiding. "I used to dream about running away," she said. "When I was younger, I'd save money from selling eggs and butter, and I'd hide it in a box under my bed. I was going to take a train east and become a school teacher, somewhere far away where nobody knew me or my family." "Why didn't you?" "Because my mother got sick, and then my father needed help with the ranch. And then Vivian was old enough to need a chaperone for her social events. There was always something. And one day I woke up and realized I was 30 years old and still living in the same house, doing the same things, waiting for permission to have a life." "What happened to the money?" "My father found it, spent it on whiskey." Rhett's jaw tightened. "He sounds like a real bastard." "He is. You ever think about going back?" "To my father's ranch?" "No, there's nothing there for me. I meant going east, becoming a teacher." Hazel looked at him. "Is that your way of asking me to leave?" "No, it's my way of asking if you want to." She thought about it, really thought about it. 3 weeks ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. But now, sitting in this house with a man who barely knew her but trusted her enough to defend her, she wasn't sure. "I don't know." she said finally. Ask me again in a year. Rhett almost smiled. Deal. They stayed up until dawn. Nothing happened. Dawson didn't come back, but something between them shifted that night. They weren't friends. They weren't lovers, but they weren't strangers anymore either. They were something else, something harder to define. The following week, Horace Pell from the bank sent a letter. They'd agreed to lower the interest rate to 5%. It would save the ranch $400 a year. Hazel showed Rhett the letter over breakfast, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely pleased. You did that, he said. We did that. No, that was you. He folded the letter carefully. I've been running this ranch for 10 years and never thought to negotiate with the bank. You did it in 3 days, because you were too busy actually running the ranch. Still, I'm not good at this part. The paperwork and the contracts and the fighting with people in suits. You are. Hazel felt something warm spread through her chest. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we make this official. You handle the business side, I handle the ranch side. We split the decisions 50-50. You want me as a partner? I want someone I can trust. Turns out that's you. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even particularly affectionate. But it was the first time anyone had ever treated Hazel like an equal, and she felt something crack open inside her. All right, she said, partners. They shook hands across the table. His grip was rough and calloused, and he held on just a second too long. That afternoon, Hazel rode into town alone. She needed to pick up supplies and mail some letters to potential buyers for their cattle. The ride was peaceful, the sky clear, and for the first time in weeks she felt like maybe things were going to work out. She was wrong. She was coming out of the general store when she saw Vivian. Her sister stood across the street in front of the hotel, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Hazel made in a year. She looked radiant, perfect, everything Hazel wasn't. Their eyes met. Vivian's face shifted from surprise to something uglier. She crossed the street. Hazel. Vivian. They stared at each other. Hazel's hands clenched around her bag of supplies. I heard you married Rhett Kane, Vivian said. That must have been quite the consolation prize. What are you doing here? I'm visiting. My husband has business in Red Hollow. She tilted her head. You look different. Tired, maybe. Ranch life doesn't suit you. What do you want, Vivian? I wanted to see you, my sister, the one who took my place. You left. Nobody took anything from you. Vivian's smile was sharp. Is that what you tell yourself? That I abandoned you, so you deserve what you got? She stepped closer. Let me tell you something, Hazel. Rhett Kane didn't choose you. He settled for you. There's a difference. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's starting to believe her own fairy tale. You think because you can add numbers and boss people around, you're special now, but you're not. You're still the fat, ugly sister nobody wanted. Hazel's vision went red. Get away from me. Or what? You'll cry? You'll run home to your husband who can't even stand to sleep in the same room as you? Vivian laughed. Everyone in Red Hollow knows your marriage is a joke. They're all laughing at you, Hazel, just like they always have. Hazel swung. Her fist caught Vivian in the mouth. Her sister stumbled back, eyes wide with shock, blood on her lip. People on the street stopped and stared. Hazel's hand throbbed. She'd never hit anyone in her life. It felt good. Stay away from me, Hazel said. Stay away from my ranch. And if I ever see you again, I'll do worse than that. She walked to her horse, climbed on, and rode out of town. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She didn't look back. When she got home, Rhett was in the barn. He took one look at her face and said, What happened? I saw Vivian. His expression darkened. Where? In town. She said some things. Hazel looked at her bruised knuckles. I hit her. Rhett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Good. Good? She deserved it. And honestly, I'm surprised you waited this long. Hazel felt something break loose in her chest. A laugh, or maybe a sob. I don't know what I'm doing, Rhett. I don't know how to be a wife. I don't know how to run a ranch. I'm just making it up as I go and hoping I don't destroy everything. That's all any of us do. But you're good at it. No, I'm not. I just hide it better. He stepped closer. You want to know the truth? This ranch was falling apart before you got here. I was drowning and didn't even know it. You saved us. Not me. You. I'm not a hero. I didn't say you were. Heroes are useless. I need someone who can fight. He reached out and took her hand, the one with bruised knuckles. His thumb brushed over the swelling. Did you win? I got in one good punch. That's all you need. He let go of her hand and went back to work. Hazel stood there, feeling something dangerous and complicated settling in her chest. She was falling for him. Slowly, stupidly, against every bit of common sense she had left. And it was going to destroy her. The thing about falling for someone who didn't want you was that it happened in pieces. Small moments that didn't mean anything by themselves, but added up to something you couldn't ignore. Like the way Rhett started leaving coffee for her in the mornings before he went out to work. He never said anything about it. Just set the cup on the table where she'd find it, still hot. Or the way he fixed the squeaky hinge on her bedroom door without being asked. Or the afternoon she found him in the office, squinting at the ledgers she'd reorganized, and he looked up and said, I can actually read this now. Thank you. Small things, stupid things, things that shouldn't have mattered, but they did. 2 months after the wedding, autumn started rolling in. The days got shorter, the nights colder. Hazel spent most of her time in the office, writing letters to potential cattle buyers and arguing with suppliers over prices. Rhett spent his days in the saddle, checking fences and moving herds to winter pasture. They fell into a rhythm that almost felt normal. Almost. Because every night, Rhett still slept downstairs. And every night, Hazel lay awake in that too-perfect bedroom, hating herself for wanting something she couldn't have. The ranch was doing better. That was something, at least. They'd cut costs by 15%. Cattle prices were up. 3 new hands had signed on after word spread that the Kane Ranch was paying fair wages again. Dutch had quit in a rage, and good riddance. The remaining workers respected Hazel now, or at least feared her enough to be polite. Frank Dawson was still a problem. He'd filed a lawsuit over the water access, which meant lawyers and court dates and money they didn't have. But Hazel had found a territorial law that backed their position, and the judge seemed inclined to rule in their favor. Dawson sent threatening letters once a week. Rhett burned them without reading past the first line. He's not going to let this go, Hazel said one evening. They were in the front room, her with paperwork, him cleaning his rifle. I know. What if he does something worse than sue us? Like what? I don't know. Burn down the barn, poison the water, hurt someone. Rhett looked up. You worried? Aren't you? Worry doesn't change anything. We deal with problems when they show up. That's a terrible philosophy. It's kept me alive this long. He went back to cleaning the rifle. Hazel watched him work, hands steady and sure, and felt that dangerous warmth in her chest again. She needed to stop this, needed to remember that Rhett didn't love her, would never love her. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. But then he glanced at her and said, You should learn to shoot. What? A gun. You should learn, in case something happens and I'm not here. You think something's going to happen? I think it's better to be ready. He set down the rifle. Come on. He took her outside to the empty field behind the barn. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Rhett set up a row of bottles on a fence post, then handed her a revolver. Ever fired one before? Once. My father tried to teach me when I was 12. I hit the barn instead of the target, and he said I was hopeless. Your father's an idiot. Here. He showed her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe before pulling the trigger. His hands covered hers, adjusting her grip, and Hazel's heart hammered so loud she was sure he could hear it. Now shoot, he said. She pulled the trigger. The recoil jarred her arms, and the shot went wide, kicking up dirt 10 feet from the bottles. Again. She tried 5 more times, missed every shot. Her arms ached and her ears rang, and she wanted to throw the damn gun into the creek. I can't do this. Yes, you can. You're rushing it. Slow down. I'm not rushing. You are. Watch. He took the gun and fired. The first bottle exploded. See? It's not about force. It's about patience. He handed the gun back. Hazel took a breath, aimed, and squeezed the trigger slowly this time. The second bottle shattered. Rhett grinned. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his whole face. There you go. I did it. Yeah, you did. She shot 3 more times and hit 2 more bottles. By the time they were done, the sun had set completely and the air was freezing. Hazel's hands were numb, but she felt electric, alive in a way she hadn't in years. Thank you, she said. For what? For teaching me. For not giving up when I said I couldn't do it. Rhett looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, something soft and complicated. Then he turned away. We should get inside. It's getting cold. They walked back to the house in silence. Hazel wanted to say something, anything to keep this moment going, but she didn't know what. So she said nothing, and the moment passed. That night, she lay in bed replaying the way his hands felt over hers, the way he smiled when she hit the bottle, the way he looked at her like maybe she wasn't a complete disaster. It was pathetic. She knew it was pathetic, but she held on to it anyway. The lawsuit dragged on for another month. Hazel spent hours preparing documents and statements for their lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Boone, who charged too much but knew her business. The court date was set for late November, which meant Dawson's cattle would go without water for weeks. He was losing money every day. That made him dangerous. Hazel started carrying the revolver Rhett gave her. She practiced shooting every evening until her aim improved from terrible to merely bad. Rhett never said anything about it, but she caught him watching sometimes, and he looked almost proud. Then, 3 weeks before the court date, everything went to hell. Hazel was in town picking up supplies when she ran into Margaret Boone outside the courthouse. The lawyer's face was grim. "We need to talk," Margaret said. They went to the hotel restaurant, a dingy place that smelled like old grease. Margaret ordered coffee and didn't touch it. Dawson's lawyer filed a countersuit, she said. They're claiming the Kane Ranch owes them damages for lost livestock due to the water shutoff, $20,000. Hazel's stomach dropped. That's insane. That's also probably fabricated, but they have documentation, bills of sale for cattle they claim died from dehydration, veterinary reports. It's all fake, but proving that in court will cost money and time. How much money? More than you have. And Dawson knows it. He's trying to bankrupt you before the case even goes to trial. Hazel's hands clenched around her coffee cup. What are our options? Settle. Give him partial water access and drop the theft charges. No. Hazel, he stole from us. He's lying in court. We're not rewarding that. Margaret sighed. Then you need to find evidence that his claims are false. And you need to find it fast. Hazel rode back to the ranch with her mind racing. $20,000 might as well have been $1 million. They didn't have it. Even if they sold half the herd, they'd barely cover a fraction. Dawson had them cornered. She found Rhett in the barn, shoeing a horse. He took one look at her face and set down the hammer. What happened? She told him. All of it. The countersuit, the fake documentation, the impossible amount of money. When she finished, Rhett was silent for a long time. So we're finished, he said finally. Not yet. Margaret said if we can prove he's lying. How? Break into his ranch and steal his real account books? That's a good way to get shot. Then we find another way. There is no other way, Hazel. Dawson's got lawyers and money and connections. We've got a stack of bills and a lawsuit we can't afford to fight. So we just give up? I'm saying we're out of options. Hazel's frustration boiled over. You know what your problem is? You're so used to losing that you don't know how to fight for something that matters. Rhett's eyes went cold. Careful. Why? You gonna throw me out, send me back to my father? Go ahead. I've got nothing left to lose anyway. Neither do I. That's the point. Then why won't you fight? Because I'm tired. His voice cracked like a whip. I'm tired of fighting my father, fighting the weather, fighting men like Dawson who have 10 times the resources I do. I'm tired of holding on to something that's falling apart no matter what I do. Maybe it's time to just let go. And do what? Sell the ranch? Work for someone else for the rest of your life? At least I'd stop drowning. Hazel stared at him. You're serious? Yeah, I am. After everything we've done to save this place, you're just going to walk away. What choice do I have? You could trust me. Rhett laughed, bitter and tired. Trust you to do what? Pull money out of thin air? Make Dawson disappear? You're good with numbers, Hazel, but you can't fix this. It hit her like a slap. For weeks she'd been telling herself that she mattered here, that she was making a difference, that Rhett saw her as an equal. But he didn't. He still saw her as the backup plan, the woman who tried hard but wasn't enough. "Fine," she said quietly. "Give up, but I'm not." She walked out of the barn before he could say anything else. That night, Hazel didn't sleep. She sat in the office going through every document, every contract, every scrap of paper related to the Dawson Ranch. There had to be something, some mistake, some contradiction, some proof that his claims were false. She found it at 3 in the morning. It was a single line in one of Dawson's veterinary reports. The vet claimed he'd examined 15 head of cattle on September 20th and found them suffering from dehydration. But September 20th was the day before Rhett shut off the water. The timeline didn't match. It wasn't much, but it was something. Hazel grabbed the document and ran downstairs. Rhett was asleep on the couch in the front room, still fully dressed. She shook his shoulder. "Wake up." He jerked awake, reaching for the gun he kept on the side table. "What's wrong?" "Look at this." She shoved the paper in his face. "The vet report. Look at the date." He squinted at it in the lamplight. She watched his expression change as he understood. "This says the cattle were sick the day before we cut the water, which means they couldn't have died from our shutoff. Either Dawson's vet is incompetent or he's lying." Rhett sat up. "This could work. It's not enough to prove fraud, but it's enough to cast doubt on his whole case. If one document is wrong, maybe they all are. We need to show this to Margaret. First thing tomorrow." They looked at each other in the dim lamplight. Rhett's hair was messed up from sleep, his eyes still heavy. He looked younger like this, less hard. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said earlier. You're not the problem. I am." "You're not a problem. You're just scared." "Yeah, I am." He rubbed his face. "I spent my whole life building this place, and I'm watching it fall apart. That's a hard thing to sit with." "Then don't sit with it alone." The words hung between them. Hazel hadn't meant to say it, but it was true. They'd been living in the same house for months, fighting the same battles, but they were still facing everything separately, like two people drowning in different parts of the same river. "I don't know how to do this," Rhett said quietly. "The partnership thing. I'm not good at letting people help." "I noticed. But you're right. I can't do this alone." He looked at her. "I need you." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even particularly romantic. But it was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, and Hazel felt something crack wide open in her chest. "You have me," she said. They stayed like that for a moment, sitting in the lamplight, close enough to touch, but not touching. Then Rhett stood up. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we take this to Margaret and start fighting back." Hazel went upstairs. But she didn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about the way Rhett looked at her, the way his voice softened when he said he needed her. It probably didn't mean what she wanted it to mean, but for the first time since the wedding, she let herself hope that maybe, eventually, it could. Margaret Boone took one look at the veterinary report and smiled like a wolf. "This is good," she said. "This is very good. It doesn't prove fraud outright, but it's enough to subpoena Dawson's full veterinary records. If one date is wrong, chances are others are too." "How long will that take?" Rhett asked. "A week, maybe 2. Depends on how much Dawson's lawyer wants to fight it." "He'll fight. Let him. Every day he stalls makes him look guiltier." Margaret tapped the document. "You two might actually win this thing." They left the lawyer's office feeling something close to optimistic. It was a strange feeling. Hazel wasn't used to optimism. She was used to waiting for the next disaster. The disaster came 2 days later. Hazel was in the kitchen making dinner when she heard shouting outside. She ran to the window and saw flames. The barn was on fire. She grabbed a bucket and ran outside. Rhett was already there with 3 of the hands, throwing water on the flames, but it was spreading too fast. The horses inside were screaming. "Get them out!" Rhett yelled. Hazel dropped the bucket and ran into the barn. Smoke choked her lungs and heat seared her face. She couldn't see anything. She followed the sound of the horses and found the stalls. Her hand shook as she fumbled with the latches. The first horse bolted past her, eyes white with terror. She moved to the second stall and got it open just as part of the roof collapsed behind her. Sparks rained down. She choked on smoke and kept moving. The third horse wouldn't come out. It reared and kicked, too panicked to understand she was trying to help. Hazel grabbed its halter and pulled. It fought her. She pulled harder. Then someone grabbed her from behind and dragged her backward. Rhett. He was shouting something, but she couldn't hear over the roar of the fire. He pulled her out of the barn just as another section of roof came down. They hit the ground hard. Hazel coughed until she thought her lungs would tear apart. Rhett's face was black with soot, and his hands were burned. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "You could have died in there. The horses. I don't care about the horses. I care about you." Hazel stared at him. His face was furious and terrified, and something else she couldn't name. Then he kissed her. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was desperate and angry, and tasted like smoke. His hands cupped her face, and her fingers dug into his shoulders, and for a moment the world stopped burning. When he pulled back, they were both shaking. "Don't ever do that again," he said. "Which part?" "Any of it." They sat there in the dirt, watching the barn burn. By the time the flames died down, it was nothing but charred wood and ash. They'd saved 4 of the 6 horses. The other 2 hadn't made it. The hands gathered around the wreckage. One of them, a young guy named Tom, found something in the dirt near the barn's entrance. "Boss," he said, "you need to see this." It was a bottle, the kind used for kerosene. It smelled like accelerant. Rhett's face went hard as stone. "Someone set this." "Dawson," Hazel said. "We don't know that." "Who else would it be?" Rhett didn't answer. He stared at the burned barn, at the dead horses, at everything they'd lost. Then he turned to Tom. "Get the sheriff." The sheriff came out the next morning, a fat man named Warren, who clearly didn't want to be there. He looked at the bottle, looked at the barn, and shrugged. "Could be arson, could be an accident, hard to say." "It's not hard to say," Hazel snapped. "Someone deliberately burned down our barn." "You got proof of that?" "The kerosene bottle? Could have been left there by one of your hands. Could have been tossed by a drifter. Could have been a lot of things." "It was Frank Dawson." Warren's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Kane. You got witnesses? Evidence?" "The lawsuit." "Oh, a civil suit isn't evidence of arson. You want to press charges? You need proof. Otherwise, it's your word against his." Rhett stepped forward. "Then get proof. Do your job." "I am doing my job. And my job says there's not enough here to arrest anyone." Warren tipped his hat. "You folks have a nice day." He left. Hazel wanted to scream. "He's not going to do anything," she said. "I know," Rhett said. "Dawson tried to kill us, and he's going to get away with it." "I know. So what do we do?" Rhett looked at the ruins of the barn, then at her. His eyes were cold and hard and decided. "We finished this," he said, "one way or another." That night, Rhett didn't sleep downstairs. He came upstairs to her room and sat on the edge of her bed without saying anything. Hazel waited. "I'm not a good man," he said finally. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people, made mistakes. I'm not the kind of person anyone should rely on." "I don't believe that." "You should." He looked at her. "But I meant what I said earlier. I care about you more than I should, more than is smart." Hazel's heart was hammering. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if something happens to me, I want you to know it wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. You took a bad situation and made it better, and I'm grateful for that." "Rhett, what are you planning?" He didn't answer. He just leaned over and kissed her forehead, gentle this time, and left. Hazel sat alone in the dark, terrified of what morning would bring. Morning came too fast. Hazel woke to an empty house and the sick feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She found a note on the kitchen table in Rhett's handwriting. "Gone to settle things. Don't follow. R." She crumpled the note and ran outside. His horse was gone. So were 2 of the ranch hands. Tom stood by the corral looking uncomfortable. "Where did he go?" Hazel demanded. "He didn't say, ma'am." "Don't lie to me." Tom shifted his weight. "He told me not to tell you. And I'm telling you that if something happens to him because you kept your mouth shut, I will personally make sure you never work on another ranch in this territory." "Where did he go?" Tom swallowed hard. "The Dawson place. He said he was going to get proof." Hazel's blood went cold. "When did he leave?" "About an hour ago." She was saddling her horse before Tom finished talking. Her hand shook as she tightened the cinch. Rhett was going to get himself killed. Dawson had a dozen men on his ranch, all of them armed. If Rhett rode in there looking for evidence, they'd shoot him on sight and call it trespassing. Mrs. Kane, you can't go after him, Tom said. He told me to keep you here. Then you're doing a terrible job. She swung into the saddle and kicked the horse into a gallop. The morning air was cold and sharp. Her breath came out in white clouds. The Dawson Ranch was 12 miles east, across the river and through a stretch of open prairie. She pushed the horse as hard as she dared. Her mind raced faster than the hooves. What was Rhett's plan? Break into Dawson's office, steal documents, confront him directly? None of those options ended well. Rhett was tough, but he wasn't invincible, and he was angry enough to do something stupid. The sun was climbing higher when she reached the river crossing. The water was low this time of year, barely knee-deep on the horse. She splashed through it and came out on the other side with her boots soaked and her heart hammering. The Dawson Ranch sat on a rise surrounded by flat grassland. There was nowhere to hide, no cover. If Dawson's men were watching, they'd see her coming from a mile away. She slowed the horse to a trot and tried to look like she had legitimate business there. Her hand rested on the revolver at her hip. The main house was bigger than the Kane Ranch, a sprawling two-story structure with a wide porch and ornate railings. Expensive. Built with money from water rights and stolen cattle and decades of bullying smaller ranchers into submission. Hazel hated it on sight. She tied her horse to the hitching post and walked up the porch steps. Before she could knock, the door opened. Frank Dawson stood there with a whiskey glass in one hand and a smile that made her skin crawl. "Mrs. Kane," he said, "what a pleasant surprise." "Where's my husband?" "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "He came here this morning. Where is he?" Dawson took a sip of whiskey. "A lot of people come and go from this ranch, Mrs. Kane. I can't keep track of everyone." "If you hurt him." "Now, why would I do that? Your husband and I may have our disagreements, but I'm not a violent man. You burned down our barn." "That's a terrible accusation. Do you have proof?" Hazel's hand moved toward her gun. Dawson's eyes flicked down to it, and his smile widened. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. My men are watching from the bunkhouse. You pull that gun and they'll put 6 bullets in you before you clear leather." She forced her hand away from the revolver. "Where is Rhett?" "Inside, we're having a conversation. You're welcome to join us." He stepped aside. Hazel's instinct screamed at her not to go in, but she didn't have a choice. She walked through the door into a front room that smelled like cigar smoke and old money. Expensive furniture, paintings on the walls, a chandelier that probably cost more than her father's entire ranch. Rhett sat in a leather chair near the fireplace. His face was bruised and his lip was bleeding. 3 of Dawson's men stood around him with rifles. When he saw Hazel, his expression went dark. "I told you not to follow me. And I told you I'm not good at following orders." "Isn't that sweet?" Dawson said. "The ugly bride comes to rescue her husband. Very romantic." Hazel ignored him. "Are you all right?" "I've been better," Rhett said. "But I got what I came for." "Did you?" Dawson walked to his desk and picked up a folder. "You mean these? The veterinary records you think will prove I'm lying?" He tossed the folder into the fireplace. The papers caught immediately and curled into ash. "Oops." Hazel's stomach dropped. "You can't do that. Those are legal documents." "They were copies, and I can do whatever I want on my own property." Dawson poured himself more whiskey. "Here's what's going to happen. You and your husband are going to drop the lawsuit. You're going to restore my water access, and you're going to sell me mineral rights to the north quarter of your land at a price I determine. In exchange, I won't press charges for trespassing and attempted theft." "We're not giving you anything," Hazel said. "Then your husband goes to jail, and while he's locked up, I'll make sure your ranch falls apart. I'll buy your debts from the bank. I'll block your cattle from market. I'll make it so no one in this territory will do business with you. By the time Rhett gets out, you'll have nothing left." Rhett started to stand. One of the men jabbed him with a rifle barrel, and he sat back down. "Don't," Hazel said quietly. "Listen to your wife," Dawson said. "She's smarter than you are." "Smart enough to know you're bluffing," Hazel said. "You can't prove Rhett tried to steal anything because you burned the evidence. And you can't press charges without admitting those records existed in the first place, which means admitting you committed fraud." Dawson's smile faltered. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. You fabricated veterinary reports to inflate your damages. That's fraud. And if we go to court, our lawyer will tear you apart. You burned those papers because you're scared. I'm not scared of you. You should be." The room went silent. Dawson stared at her, and for the first time Hazel saw uncertainty in his eyes. Then someone knocked on the door. One of Dawson's men opened it. Sheriff Warren stood on the porch looking even less happy than usual. Behind him was Margaret Boone and a man in a suit Hazel didn't recognize. "Frank," Warren said, "we need to talk." Dawson's face went pale. "What's this about?" The man in the suit stepped forward. "I'm Deputy Marshal Cole from the Territorial Court. We have a warrant to search your property for fraudulent documents related to Kane versus Dawson." "You can't do that without probable cause." "We have probable cause. Your veterinarian came forward this morning, said you paid him to backdate reports and inflate cattle losses." Marshal Cole held up the warrant. "So we're going to search this house, and if we find what we're looking for, you're going to jail." Dawson looked like he'd been hit with a hammer. "That lying son of a bitch. I paid him." He stopped. Too late. Margaret Boone smiled. "That sounded like a confession. Get out of my house." "I don't think so." Marshal Cole gestured to Warren. "Sheriff, if you'd be so kind." Warren looked miserable, but he pulled out handcuffs. "Frank Dawson, you're under arrest for fraud and attempted intimidation of witnesses." Dawson's men shifted nervously. One of them raised his rifle, but Marshal Cole pulled his own gun faster. "Don't be stupid. Drop the weapons." They dropped them. Warren cuffed Dawson, who was turning purple with rage. "This isn't over. I'll have your jobs, all of you." "Sure you will," Warren muttered. They led Dawson out. Marshal Cole turned to Rhett and Hazel. "You two all right?" "We're fine," Rhett said. His voice was rough. "How did you know we were here?" "Your ranch hand, Tom. He rode into town and found me. Said you might need help." Cole tipped his hat. "You've got good people working for you." After they left, Hazel and Rhett stood alone in Dawson's expensive front room. Rhett touched his split lip and winced. "That was stupid," Hazel said. "I know. You could have been killed." "I know." "And you still went anyway." "Yeah." He looked at her. "Because I'm tired of running. Tired of letting people like Dawson walk all over us. I figured if I was going down, I might as well go down fighting." "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Probably." She hit him, not hard, just a shove to his chest. "Don't ever do that to me again. Don't leave me a note and disappear. Don't make me think I'm going to lose you. I didn't think you'd care." "Of course I care, you idiot. She stopped. The words were right there, dangerous and true, but saying them would change everything. "You what?" Rhett asked quietly. Hazel looked at him, at his bruised face and tired eyes, and the way he was watching her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "I love you," she said. "I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But I do." Rhett didn't say anything. He just pulled her against him and kissed her like the world was ending. His hands were in her hair and her arms wrapped around his neck, and nothing else existed except this moment, this feeling, this impossible thing that shouldn't have happened but did. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I'm not good at this," Rhett said. "The feelings part, the talking part. I don't know how to be what you need." "I don't need you to be anything except honest." "Honest?" He laughed, rough and low. "All right. Honestly, I've been falling for you since the day you tore apart my account books and told me I was getting robbed. Maybe before that. I don't know. All I know is that somewhere along the way you stopped being the woman I was forced to marry and became the only person I want to wake up next to." Hazel's eyes burned. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." "It's probably the most romantic thing I've ever said to anyone." They stood there holding each other in Frank Dawson's front room, and Hazel felt something settle into place. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale Vivian had always dreamed about, but it was real, and it was theirs, and that was enough. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but not uncomfortable. They rode side by side, hands occasionally brushing. The sun was high and warm despite the autumn chill. Hazel felt lighter than she had in months, like something heavy had been lifted off her chest. When they got home, Tom was waiting in the yard looking nervous. "Everything all right, boss?" "Yeah," Rhett said, "thanks to you. That was quick thinking, writing for the marshal." Tom's face relaxed. Just didn't want anything bad to happen is all. You did good. That night, Rhett finally came upstairs. Not to sit on the edge of the bed and talk. To stay. They lay together in the dark, not saying much, just existing in the same space. His arm was around her shoulders and her head rested on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. "What happens now?" she asked. "With Dawson?" "With everything." Rhett was quiet for a moment. "We rebuild the barn. We win the lawsuit. We keep the ranch going, same as before, except now we do it together." "That simple?" "Nothing's ever simple, but we'll figure it out." Hazel closed her eyes. For the first time since the wedding, she let herself believe that maybe things would actually be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but survivable. She was almost asleep when someone pounded on the front door. Rhett was out of bed instantly, grabbing his rifle. Hazel pulled on a robe and followed him downstairs. He opened the door to find Margaret Boone standing on the porch. Her face was grim. "We have a problem," she said. They let her inside. She looked exhausted, like she'd been writing all night. "Dawson made bail," she said, and posted it an hour after they locked him up. "How?" Hazel asked. "The bail was set at $10,000. His father posted it. Turns out the Dawson family has more money than we thought. A lot more." Rhett's jaw tightened. "So he's free." "For now, but that's not the worst part." Margaret pulled out a document. "He filed an emergency injunction against you. Claims you're interfering with his water access out of spite and that it's causing irreparable harm to his ranch. The judge granted it. You have to restore his access by tomorrow morning or face contempt charges." Hazel felt cold. "We just got him arrested and he's still winning? He's got resources we don't. Money buys a lot of second chances." Margaret set the document on the table. "I'm sorry. I tried to block it, but the judge is an old friend of the Dawson family." After she left, Hazel and Rhett sat in the dark front room. The victory from earlier felt hollow now. They'd fought so hard, risked so much, and Dawson was still finding ways to hurt them. "We could leave," Hazel said quietly. "Sell the ranch. Start over somewhere else." "You want to run?" "I want us to survive. And I don't know if we can do that here." Rhett looked at her. "If we leave, men like Dawson win. They get to keep taking whatever they want from whoever's too weak to fight back. Is that the world you want to live in?" "No, but I don't want to lose you either." "You won't." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I won't go down without a fight." He took her hand. "We've come this far. Let's see it through." Hazel wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it wasn't worth it, but she knew he was right. Running wouldn't solve anything. They'd just end up somewhere else with different problems and the same regrets. "All right," she said. "We fight." The next morning, they restored Dawson's water access. It felt like swallowing poison, but they didn't have a choice. The contempt charges would have destroyed them faster than any lawsuit. Then Hazel went back to work. If Dawson wanted to play dirty, she'd play dirtier. She spent 3 days going through every public record she could find related to the Dawson Ranch. Land deeds, tax records, water contracts. She was looking for anything that could hurt him the way he was hurting them. She found it in a 20-year-old mining claim. The north quarter of the Dawson Ranch sat on land that had been part of a territorial mining dispute in 1855. The claim had never been fully resolved, which meant the ownership was technically in question. It was a legal gray area that most people had forgotten about. But Hazel hadn't, and she knew exactly how to use it. She took her findings to Margaret Boone. The lawyer's eyes lit up when she saw the documents. "This is brilliant," Margaret said. "If we file a claim on the mining rights, it ties up Dawson's land in legal limbo. He can't sell it, can't develop it, can't use it as collateral for loans. It'll cost him tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to resolve." "How long will it take?" "Years, maybe decades if we fight hard enough." "And it's legal?" "Completely. Unethical as hell, but legal." Margaret grinned. "You're learning how to play this game, Hazel. I'm learning how to survive it." They filed the claim the next day. Frank Dawson showed up at the ranch that evening with murder in his eyes. Rhett met him in the yard with a rifle. "That's far enough." "You bitch!" Dawson was staring at Hazel. "You filed a mining claim on my land." "It's not your land," Hazel said calmly. "According to territorial law, the ownership is in dispute. We're just exercising our legal rights. You're destroying my ranch. No, we're doing exactly what you tried to do to us. How does it feel? Dawson's face turned purple. I'll kill you, both of you. Rhett raised the rifle. Get off my property. This isn't over. It is for today. Dawson left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Hazel knew this was only the beginning. They'd made an enemy who wouldn't stop until one of them was destroyed. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She had Rhett beside her. She had a ranch worth fighting for. And she had finally learned how to hit back. That night, lying in bed with Rhett's arm around her, Hazel said, "Do you think we'll win?" "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know we're still standing. That counts for something. It counts for everything." She closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new problems, new reasons to worry. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. They were together, and that was enough. 3 days later, a courier arrived with a letter. It was from Barrett Kane, Rhett's father. Hazel watched Rhett's face go blank as he read it. "What does it say?" she asked. "He wants to meet. Says he has a proposal that will solve all our problems." "Do you trust him?" "No, but I'm curious enough to listen." He looked at her. "Will you come with me?" Of course. They rode to the Kane family's main ranch the next morning. It was bigger than Hazel expected, a compound that looked more like a small town than a working ranch. Dozens of buildings, hundreds of cattle, men working everywhere. This was the empire Rhett had walked away from. Barrett Kane waited for them in his study, a massive room filled with animal heads and expensive furniture. He was older than Hazel remembered, his hair completely gray, but his eyes were still sharp and cruel. "Rhett," he said, "and the unfortunate bride. Please, sit." They didn't sit. Rhett stayed standing, tense as a drawn bowstring. "What do you want?" he asked. "To help you. I hear you're having trouble with Frank Dawson." "We're handling it." "Are you?" "Because from what I hear, you're drowning. Legal fees, lost livestock, a burned barn. That's not handling it, son. That's dying slowly." "If you came here to gloat, I came here to make you an offer." Barrett leaned forward. "Come back. Work for me. Bring your wife, keep your dignity, and I'll make the Dawson problem disappear. He owes me favors. I'll call them in." Rhett laughed. "You want me to work for you? I want you to stop being stupid. You're my son. This ranch will be yours someday. Stop fighting it." "And what do you get out of this?" "Control. Same thing I've always wanted." Barrett's gaze shifted to Hazel. "And her. She's smarter than I expected. I could use someone like that managing my accounts." Hazel felt ice in her stomach. This wasn't help. It was a cage with better furniture. "No," Rhett said. "Think about it." "I said no. I'd rather lose everything than spend one more day under your control." Barrett's expression hardened. "Then you'll lose everything. And when you do, don't come crawling back." "I won't." They walked out. Hazel's hands were shaking. "He's going to make things worse for us, isn't he?" "Probably." "Was it worth it, saying no?" Rhett stopped and turned to face her. "Yeah, it was. Because the only thing worse than losing would be winning his way." Hazel kissed him right there in the yard, in full view of Barrett's workers. Let them see. Let them know that Rhett Kane chose her, chose freedom, chose a hard life over an easy surrender. When they pulled apart, Rhett was smiling. "Let's go home." "Yeah, let's go home." They rode back to their broken-down ranch with its burned barn and uncertain future, and Hazel had never felt richer in her life. Barrett Kane kept his word about making things worse. Within a week, 2 of their suppliers refused to deliver feed. The bank that had agreed to lower their interest rate suddenly reversed the decision. A buyer who'd promised to purchase 50 head of cattle backed out without explanation. Every door they'd managed to open slammed shut. Hazel watched their carefully rebuilt finances start to crumble again. She worked 16-hour days trying to find new suppliers, new buyers, new sources of income. But Barrett's influence reached further than she'd imagined. He'd spent 40 years building relationships in Red Hollow, and now he was using every one of them to strangle his own son's ranch. "We're not going to make it through winter," she told Rhett one night. The account books were spread across the kitchen table, and the numbers didn't lie. "We'll run out of feed for the cattle by January. We'll have to sell half the herd just to survive, and even that might not be enough. Rhett stared at the numbers. His face was drawn, tired. He'd been working himself to exhaustion trying to hold things together physically while Hazel fought the financial battles. So what do we do? I don't know. Hazel's voice cracked. I've tried everything. Every supplier, every buyer, every bank in 3 territories. They're all scared of your father. Then we go further. How far? We can't afford to ship cattle to Kansas City. The railroad fees would eat whatever profit we make. Rhett rubbed his face. There has to be something we're missing. There isn't. I've looked. Your father has every angle covered. She pushed the ledgers away. Maybe we should have taken his offer. Don't say that. Why not? At least we'd have food and a roof over our heads. At least we wouldn't be watching everything fall apart. We'd also be his property. Is that what you want? No, but I don't want to starve either. They sat in heavy silence. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Winter was coming, brutal and indifferent, and they weren't ready for it. Then someone knocked on the door. It was past 9 o'clock, too late for visitors. Rhett grabbed his rifle and opened it cautiously. Vivian stood on the porch. She looked different than the last time Hazel had seen her. Thinner. Her expensive dress was wrinkled and her hair wasn't perfectly styled, but her eyes were the same, sharp and calculating. Can I come in? She asked. No, Hazel said from the table. Please, I need to talk to you. You need to leave before I shoot you. Hazel, I'm serious. I have information about Barrett Kane, information that can help you. Rhett looked at Hazel. She wanted to slam the door in Vivian's face, wanted to tell her to go to hell, but they were desperate, and desperate people couldn't afford pride. 5 minutes, Hazel said. Then you leave. Vivian came inside. She looked around the modest house and something flickered across her face. Not contempt, like Hazel expected. Something closer to regret. Nice place, Vivian said quietly. You didn't come here to compliment the furniture. What do you want? Vivian sat down without being invited. My marriage fell apart. Thomas, my husband, he wasn't who he said he was. The money was borrowed. The business was failing. 2 months ago, he disappeared with what little we had left. I've been staying with a friend in Red Hollow, trying to figure out what to do. That's tragic. I don't care. I know you don't. I wouldn't either if I were you. Vivian's hands twisted together. But while I was in town, I heard things. Barrett Kane has been buying up debts. Not just yours. Half the ranches in Red Hollow owe him money. He's building something. A monopoly. He wants to control all the land and water rights in the territory. That's not news, Rhett said. My father's been trying to build an empire for 30 years. But now he's close. There are only 3 ranches left that he doesn't control. Yours, the Morrison Place, and the Chen Ranch. If he gets all 3, he'll own everything from here to the territorial border. That's millions of acres. Enough to control cattle prices, water access, everything. Hazel's mind was already working. So he needs us to fail. He needs you to fail badly enough that you're forced to sell to him. That's why he's blocking your suppliers and buyers. He's not just punishing Rhett. He's clearing obstacles. How do you know all this? Vivian looked down. Because I was at a party last week at the Kane estate. Barrett was drunk and talking too much. He said once he got rid of the last obstacles, Red Hollow would be his completely. Then he laughed and said it was poetic that his own son would be the easiest to break. Rhett's hands curled into fists. That son of a bitch. There's more, Vivian said. He's planning to foreclose on the Morrison Ranch next week. They missed 2 loan payments and Barrett owns the debt. Once he has their land, he'll go after the Chen place. Then he'll come for you. Hazel felt cold. How long do we have? Until spring, maybe. That's when your next loan payment is due. If you miss it, he can call in the debt and take the ranch. Why are you telling us this? Hazel asked. What do you get out of it? Vivian met her eyes. Nothing. I get nothing. I just thought you should know what you're up against. She stood up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I ruined your life, but for what it's worth, I'm sorry. You deserve better than being stuck with my mess. She walked to the door. Hazel watched her go and felt something complicated twist in her chest. Anger and pity and old wounds that hadn't quite healed. Vivian, she called. Her sister stopped. Thank you. Vivian nodded once and left. The door closed behind her, and Hazel and Rhett were alone again with information that changed everything. "We need to talk to Morrison and Chen," Hazel said. "If your father's coming for them, they need to know." "They won't listen. Morrison's proud, and Chen doesn't trust white ranchers. They'll think it's a trick." "Then we make them listen. Because if they fall, we fall too." The next morning, they rode to the Morrison Ranch. James Morrison was a hard man in his 60s who'd built his ranch from nothing and defended it through droughts, floods, and Indian raids. He didn't like visitors, especially young ones telling him his business. "Barrett Kane doesn't scare me," Morrison said when they explained the situation. "I've dealt with men like him my whole life." "He owns your debt," Hazel said. "If you miss another payment, he can take your ranch." "I'm not going to miss the payment." "Can you afford to make it?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern." "It is if we're all fighting the same enemy. Barrett wants to control the whole territory. He's picking us off one at a time. But if we work together, I don't work with anyone. I survive alone." "Then you'll die alone," Rhett said, "and my father will take everything you built." Morrison stared at him. "Get off my property." They left. The Chen Ranch was next, a smaller operation run by Michael Chen and his two sons. They were fourth-generation ranchers, descendants of railroad workers who'd saved enough to buy land. They faced constant prejudice from white ranchers who didn't think they belonged. Michael Chen listened to their story without interrupting. When they finished, he said, "Why should I trust you? Rhett Kane's father has tried to buy my land for 20 years. For all I know, this is another trick." "It's not a trick," Hazel said. "Barrett is trying to destroy us too. We're all in danger." "And what do you propose we do?" "We form a cooperative, pool our resources, buy supplies together, sell cattle together, negotiate as a group instead of individuals. If we're united, we're harder to break." Michael looked at his sons. They exchanged words in Chinese. Finally, Michael turned back to them. "Morrison will never agree to this. He's too proud. Then we do it without him. A cooperative needs at least 3 ranches to have bargaining power. 2 isn't enough." Hazel's mind raced. What about the smaller ranches, the ones Barrett hasn't targeted yet? They're too scared to stand up to him. Maybe they just need someone to go first. Over the next 2 weeks, Hazel and Rhett visited every independent ranch within 50 miles. Some slammed doors in their faces. Others listened but said no. But slowly, painfully, they found allies. The widow Martinez, whose husband had died leaving her with debt and 3 children. The Kowalski brothers, who barely spoke English but understood the word cooperative. Young Tom Baker, who'd inherited his father's failing ranch and was desperate for help. By the end of November, they had 7 ranches willing to join. It wasn't enough to challenge Barrett directly, but it was a start. They held their first meeting in the Kane barn, the one Rhett had rebuilt after the fire. 14 people crowded into the space, all of them nervous, all of them wondering if this would work. "Here's the deal," Hazel said. She'd prepared for this, had numbers and contracts and plans written out. "We pool our resources for purchasing feed, equipment, and supplies. We negotiate as a group, which gives us leverage for better prices. We sell our cattle together, which means better market access and higher profits. And we establish a mutual aid fund. If one ranch has trouble, the others help. Nobody faces Barrett Kane alone." "What if someone backs out?" asked Mrs. Martinez. "What if they take the benefits and then leave?" "We sign contracts, binding agreements. Anyone who breaks them faces legal penalties." "What about Morrison?" one of the Kowalski brothers asked. "He's the biggest independent ranch besides yours. Without him, we're still too small." "I'm working on Morrison," Rhett said, but Morrison refused to budge. Hazel visited him 3 more times, and each time he told her to leave. The old man was stubborn as granite and twice as hard. Then, a week before Christmas, Morrison's barn burned down. Just like the Kane barn, it was arson. Just like before, Sheriff Warren did nothing. Hazel heard about it the next morning and rode out immediately. Morrison was standing in the ashes, his face gray and defeated. His wife was crying on the porch. 50 years of work destroyed in a single night. "I'm sorry," Hazel said. Morrison didn't look at her. "He won. Barrett Kane finally won. He hasn't won yet. Look around. I can't rebuild this. I don't have the money or the time. I'm finished." "You're not finished," You're joining the cooperative. I told you. I don't care what you told me. You're joining because that's the only way you survive. We'll help you rebuild. All of us. That's what the cooperative does. Morrison finally looked at her. His eyes were wet. Why would you help me? I turned you away. Because that's what neighbors do. And because Barrett Kane wins if we stay divided. It took 3 days to rebuild Morrison's barn. All 7 cooperative ranches sent workers. They brought lumber, nails, and labor. Hazel organized the effort while Rhett led the construction. By the end, Morrison had a barn that was better than the original. I don't know what to say, Morrison told them when it was finished. Say you'll join, Hazel said. He did. With 8 ranches united, the cooperative had real power. They negotiated a contract with a supplier in Kansas City who agreed to deliver at rates 20% below what Barrett's preferred vendors charged. They established a collective brand for their cattle and found buyers willing to pay premium prices for guaranteed quality. The mutual aid fund grew as each ranch contributed what it could. Barrett Kane noticed. He sent lawyers with threats and attempted to block their shipments. But the cooperative had strength in numbers and legal standing. They filed countersuits. They documented every intimidation attempt. And they kept building. Winter hit hard that year, with snow that piled 3 feet deep and temperatures that killed livestock. But the cooperative ranches survived together. When the Martinez Ranch ran out of hay, the Kane Ranch shared theirs. When the Chen Ranch lost cattle to wolves, the Morrison Ranch helped replace them. They functioned as a single entity, and it worked. By February, Barrett Kane's monopoly was crumbling. The other ranches saw what the cooperative had built and wanted in. Within 6 weeks, 15 ranches had joined, then 20, then 30. Barrett came to the Kane Ranch in March. He arrived alone without lawyers or threats. He looked older, diminished somehow. Rhett met him in the yard, but didn't invite him inside. You've built something, Barrett said. I didn't think you had it in you. Yeah, well, I had help. The ugly bride. Barrett almost smiled. She's tougher than I expected. She's tougher than anyone expected, including me. You're destroying everything I built. No, I'm building something better, something that doesn't require crushing everyone else to survive. Barrett was quiet for a long time. I wanted you to have an empire. I know, but I don't want an empire. I want a home. Those are the same thing. Not to me. Barrett looked at the ranch, at the rebuilt barn, and the workers moving with purpose. I'm not going to apologize for what I did. I'm not built that way, but I'll leave you alone from now on. The cooperative can have its territory. That's big of you. Don't push it, boy. Barrett climbed back on his horse. Your mother would have been proud. She always said you were too soft for this business. Turns out soft was what it needed. He rode away. Rhett watched him go and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet relief of being done with a fight that had lasted his whole life. Hazel came out and stood beside him. Is it over? Yeah, I think it is. What do we do now? We live, we work, we build something that lasts. She leaned against him. That sounds good. The lawsuit with Dawson was resolved in April. The judge ruled in favor of the Kane Ranch, dismissed Dawson's countersuit, and ordered him to pay court costs. Dawson never recovered. His ranch fell apart over the next year, and he eventually sold it and left the territory. Nobody missed him. The cooperative thrived. By summer, it included 40 ranches and controlled half the cattle market in Red Hollow. They established fair wages for ranch hands, created safety standards, and built a school for workers' children. Other territories started asking how to build cooperatives of their own. Hazel became the de facto leader, managing finances and contracts and negotiations. Ranchers who'd once laughed at her now sought her advice. She was no longer the unwanted sister or the replacement bride. She was Hazel Kane, the woman who'd changed how the frontier did business. In June, Vivian came to visit. She looked healthier now, less desperate. She'd found work as a seamstress in town and was rebuilding her life slowly, without anyone's help. I heard about the cooperative, Vivian said. They were sitting on the porch, drinking lemonade in the afternoon heat. They're calling you a genius. They're calling me a lot of things. Genius isn't the most common. Well, I think you are. You took a disaster and turned it into something amazing. Hazel looked at her sister. The anger had faded over the months, leaving behind something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't hatred either. Just acceptance that people were complicated and messy and nobody got through life without making mistakes. You could join the cooperative, Hazel said, if you ever want to try ranching again. Vivian laughed. I think I'm done with ranching. I'm better with a needle than a horse. The offer stands. Thank you. That means a lot. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I think about that night a lot. The night I ran. I was so sure I was escaping to something better. Turns out I was just running away from the only thing that mattered. Which was? Family, home, the things you can't replace. She looked at Hazel. You were always the strong one. I just couldn't see it. I didn't see it either. Not until someone forced me to. They sat in comfortable silence. It wasn't the relationship Hazel had dreamed of as a child, but it was real and honest, and maybe that was better. That night, Hazel and Rhett lay in bed watching the stars through the open window. The room was theirs now, not Vivian's. They'd repainted the walls and changed the furniture and made it into something that reflected both of them. It wasn't perfect or fancy, but it was home. Do you ever think about that day? Hazel asked. The wedding? Sometimes. Do you regret it? Rhett turned to look at her. Marrying you was the best decision I never wanted to make. If that makes sense? It does. What about you? Any regrets? Hazel thought about it, about the humiliation in the church and the lonely nights in the beginning and all the times she'd felt like she was drowning. Then she thought about everything that came after, the fights they'd won together, the life they'd built, the way Rhett looked at her now, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. No, she said. No regrets. He kissed her forehead. Good. They fell asleep tangled together, and Hazel dreamed of the future. Not the fairy tale future where everything was perfect and nothing hurt, but the real future, where problems existed but could be faced together, where being strong meant knowing when to ask for help, where love wasn't about being chosen first, but about choosing each other every single day. Years later, when people asked Hazel how she'd built the Red Hollow Cooperative, she'd tell them it started with being unwanted, with standing in a church in a dress that didn't fit and marrying a man who didn't want her. She'd tell them about learning that the things you don't choose can sometimes be the things that save you. And she'd tell them that the most important decision anyone can make is deciding to be more than what other people expect. Because Hazel Mercer Kane wasn't the bride who was chosen. She was the bride who chose herself. And that made all the difference. The ranch prospered, the cooperative grew. And on the frontier where survival had once meant crushing everyone else, a new way of living took root. One built on cooperation instead of competition, on mutual aid instead of mutual destruction. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it worked. And somewhere in Red Hollow, in a modest ranch house with a rebuilt barn and a woman who'd learned to shoot straight, love bloomed in the space where humiliation had once lived. Not because it was destined or fated or written in the stars, but because two broken people decided that being broken together was better than being whole alone. That was the real